"Now," said the ugly fellow, "what do you mean by coming into my house? Do you want to rob me or murder me?" So saying, he began shouting and cursing at the top of his voice. Dr. Losberne began to get alarmed. He flung some money and they returned to the carriage. "I am an ass," said the doctor as they drove away. "Even if it had been the right place and the right fellows, what could I have done single handed? They could have overpowered me or beaten me up. Even if I went with some people, I would have to explain how I know the house. And then the story of how we fooled the police about you, my dear Oliver, will have to be told." Oliver nodded. He was aware that he had been shielded from the police, who were not told that he was with the robbers. They came to the street where Mr. Brownlow stayed. Oliver pointed out the house. But when they came closer, they noticed that the house was closed up with a notice, "To Let," hanging on the door. They asked a neighbor about it. They were told that Mr. Brownlow, along with his friend Mr. Grimwick and the housekeeper, Mrs. Bedwin, had left for the West Indies a few weeks earlier. Oliver was disappointed. "The bookstore keeper," he said, "let us go there, sir, please." But Dr. Losberne was quite fed up for the day. They drove back home. Soon preparations were made to go and live in the countryside. The cottage was a lovely place with a picture book looker about it. There was a beautiful garden and sweet-smelling flowers. To Oliver, who had spent most of his young life in crowded London, it was like a paradise. The days were quiet and peaceful. Rose and Oliver used to go for long rambling walks and explored the woods and the hills. Oliver always came back with a bunch of wild flowers. In the evenings, Oliver used to go to an old gentleman in the church who taught him to read and write. When darkness fell, Rose would sit at a piano and sing some old songs in a low and gentle voice. Thus 3 months passed, in which Oliver spent some of the happiest moments of his life. Spring went and summer came. One day Rose and Oliver were out for a walk, accompanied by Mrs. Maylie. Rose felt tired, so they turned back home quite soon. When they came back, Rose, as usual, sat at the piano and began to sing. But her voice stopped and she began to weep. "What is the matter, Rose?" asked Mrs. Maylie. "Nothing, auntie," replied Rose, but her eyes were bright and her face pale. Soon she developed high fever. Mrs. Maylie was quite upset, but tried not to show it. Oliver was also getting worried. The night passed and the morning saw an increase in fever. "We must do something," said Mrs. Maylie to Oliver. "I will write a letter to Dr. Losberne in London and ask him to come here without any delay."